Before we get started, by means of an introduction, my name is Louie Lujan. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Greater Downey Association of Realtors. And I'm here to talk about the initiatives, the ballot propositions that we're going to see on the upcoming election. So as I get into it, let me do a screen share. We have a presentation on the ballot propositions. And the way that I'd like to do this is just to allow for questions as we go along. And if there are any, please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. It's not a problem. Typically, I find that when I do this, someone will have a question about a particular bullet point or something they've heard. So if there are questions, like I said, don't worry about interrupting me. It's not a problem. I'd be more than happy to answer the questions. Okay, the other thing I'll mention is that I do have a copy of the presentation if anyone is interested at the end. And the last point I'll mention is that the bullet points that you're going to see inside of the actual slides when we get through them they're very summarized versions of the ballot propositions. So just keep in mind there are a lot more details, and if you want the full version, I have it here with as many bullet points that you can imagine, more than the summary. It includes supporters, people that are against each one, so forth and so on. Bottom line, this is a surface swim, but I do have a document that would allow you to go into much more detail if you're interested. Okay. So with all of that said, there's my contact information, email, cell phone number. Take it down as we go through. If there are particular points you're interested in, feel free to contact me that way. All right. First thing I want to cover is the fact that there are 12 ballot initiatives or propositions that you're going to see on the November 3rd ballot. If you haven't received your ballot already, you'll know this. It's confusing because there are 12 ballot propositions numbered 14 through 25. So right off the bat, it gets confusing in that we have 12, but for some reason they're numbered 14 through 25. The reason is the state assigns these initiatives randomly. So there's no logic to it. It's just a random number generator that the state uses. That's the reason. All right, the first three that I'm going to go over are the ones that are most impactful to our industry. And the remaining 9, I'm going to just kind of briefly go through them without any detail. So the first 3 are the ones that are most important to our industry. And let's start with Prop 15. So Prop 15 is also known as split roll. The easiest way to remember what it does in your mind is just keep the term split roll in your head, Prop 15. And this particular initiative would literally split the tax roll into 2 parts. The first part would be the commercial portion of the tax roll, and the second would be the residential portion of the tax roll. Currently, as you probably all well know, the residential and commercial taxes are done on the same roll, the same tax roll. So California, the reason for it, at least for the proponents, has underassessed the value of commercial industrial properties. And this would be a way to, at least in the supporters' minds, allow for the commercial property owners to pay what is called their fair share of tax revenues. And it would generate billions of dollars across the state, 11% of which would be allocated to education, and 90% would be used for school districts, charter schools, county offices, and education. And residential properties would be exempt. So this would be a splitting of the commercial properties from the residential or the unified tax roll that we have now into its own independent one, thus generating billions of dollars across the state. A couple final points I'll mention on this one is that, as you can imagine, a lot of the large corporations in California, anything from, any company from Google to Microsoft and the tech industries to, large banks that have big commercial footprints are against Prop 15, obviously, because this would mean their taxes would increase dramatically. CAR does not have an official position yet, although feeling that's going to be changing as our business meetings are taking place, and they've kind of kicked the can down the road, in terms of what to do, support it or not.
Louis?
Yes.
This is John Lacey, excuse me. Do you know the mindset why CAR has not yet come up with a official position?
Yeah, I guess mindset would be maybe, well, let me explain what happened. And the reasoning is, political, if you will. So I recall at our last business meeting when we were actually able to meet in person, I was in the legislative committee room when they were talking about Prop 15, and the room was literally split in half, 50-50. You had people on one side that said this is a great idea, and then you had others that said, well, I represent commercial property interests and transactions. This is a terrible idea. And the room got really heated. It was a really, really contentious debate. So they just haven't taken it up yet, is the simple answer. They're just trying to kick it down the road to see where the cards fall, so to speak. I have a feeling they're going to end up supporting it. But again, I'd hate to speculate, but that's just my gut feeling.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. There was, by the way, some internal letters that have been sent, memos about CAR's position, and a lot of people are like you, asking why they haven't done anything sooner. But quite frankly, the reason is political. They just kind of want to stay out of the fight until the dust clears and see where the winds are blowing on this one. All right, so that's Prop 15. Let me move on to the next one, Prop 19. Now, this is a very, very important proposition to our industry. The first thing I'll point out is that there's a website that I highly encourage everybody to go onto. It's at the bottom there, yeson19.vote. And this one is known as the Tax Portability Initiative. If you recall, tax portability has been on our minds for a while in the industry. In 2018, CAR sponsored a similar measure that failed. And this is the redo of it, if you will. This is the second chance. Prop 19 has a lot of detail. There's much more detail. So I tried to pick out the most important items of the initiative. Some of them are as follows. It limits the potential for property tax increases on primary residences. People, for example, that are disabled or victims of natural disasters. This is the most important one, I think, and the easiest way to remember it is that it allows individuals to pass on family homes, or it deals with inheritances, and would essentially eliminate the tax burden, if you will, of those properties that get transferred. 20% of the revenue goes towards fire protection, forestry protection, and 80% goes towards special districts, district and department that would be created in the state of California to oversee where the funds go. CAR is obviously in support of Prop 19. They're encouraging the word to be spread and everybody to support it. A couple of other random things I'll mention about Prop 19. This is an interesting one because the supporters include the governor, the Democratic Party, CAR, like I just mentioned, professional firefighters, the nurses. It really is supported by everybody that is traditional when it comes to propositions, with the exception of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And that just is because the reason for that is simply because that organization typically is very cautious to support a proposition that would, in their minds, increase taxes. And this not necessarily would increase taxes, but in their minds, it would create government agencies that are unnecessary. So that it's a philosophical argument in their minds.
Louis?
Yes.
John Lacey again.
Hey, John, how you doing?
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Don't be sorry.
It's my understanding that if a parent passes away and the estate, the house, or whatever goes to their heirs must live into the property to avoid any kind of payment on taxes. And if the heir does not move into that house or whatever, that event then would become a taxable event. Am I saying it correctly?
You are, and that is an excellent point. You are absolutely 100% accurate on that. Now, that little bullet point you mentioned was one of the compromises, if you will, that was, it was kind of like a segue into my next point on this prop. It has so much unified support, but the question is why? How did it even get to that point of garnering firefighter support, all these different coalitions? And it was because of that one issue, that one point you mentioned. The firefighters, law enforcement, education, all of these groups that are supporting it said, hey, this is great, but if you want our support, you have to give us a piece of the pie, essentially. And that's the way they did it. They essentially said, okay, well, unless the person that inherits the property is willing to live in it, we're going to make it a taxable event, as you call it, or a transaction otherwise. So they were able to live with that compromise. And I guess their thinking was, well, how many people that inherit a home are going to actually live in it? So there's probably a good percentage that would become taxable, thus increasing the revenues for all those groups I mentioned. So excellent point you bring up. And
well said, Louie, and thank you for the explanation.
My pleasure, not a problem. Okay, so that's tax portability. Again, yes on 19.vote. I would highly encourage everybody to check that website out. All right, the last slide that I'm going to go into detail on, because it has a significant impact on our industry, is Prop 21. This is another rent control initiative that you'll see on the ballot. I get tons of questions on Prop 21. This is the one I get the most questions on, simply because the truth is that we already have AB 1482 that was signed by the governor rather. And people ask, well, how come we have Prop 21 if 1482 is in effect? And my answer is, somewhat sarcastic in when I say exactly. Why do we have another one? Well, let me explain. Let me give you some context on why we're seeing Prop 21. When rent control first came about, when we first started talking about, we've been talking about it forever, but when it really got to the forefront was when we had a new governor, when the governor switched from Brown to Newsom. And Newsom championed rent control in his city when he was mayor of the city, San Francisco. And rent control has always been something that he wanted to put on the table. So when it came onto the ballot in its original form and the people voted it down a few years ago, if you recall, rent control, the legislature frankly didn't accept that outcome. And they do have the power to overrule, if you will, any vote of the people. So the people voted rent control down, if you remember that, not too long ago. And the governor with the legislature got together and said, well, let's pass a bill to implement rent control. They had various reasons to do that. And that was 1482. So in 1482, the power on how to set the rules and implement rent control across the state is purely in the hands of the state right now, the governor's office specifically. Well, guess what? 2020 rolls around, the pandemic, the coronavirus, and cities are saying, hey, that's great, but you can't tell us what to do because you don't know what's best for our community. So if you want rent control, we want to be able to control it. We want to be able to set the rules. So we're going to put a proposition on the ballot, Prop 21, that is going to give the power to implement rent control and set the rules in the hands of the cities. So this is simply a fight, a continuation of who controls the rules of the game with regard to rent control. This is simply another round in the long fight of rent control. This is the California League of Cities versus the state of California. If Prop 21 passes, which by the way, it's polling pretty bad. If it passes, you're going to see cities implementing all of their own little individual ordinances that would set the rules for rent control. Finally, one final point on this one is that the current cap for rents is 5% per year, a little more detailed than that, but essentially it's 5% per year plus inflation, all that. If this passes, it would create a 15% cap over a 3-year period, and then it resets. It's really the same thing, because you could do 10% and 5% in 2 years, and the third year would be 0. Or you can do 5, 5, and 5 over 3 years, or you can do 15% in 1 year and 0, 0 the next. It's just kind of a creative way to play with the existing numbers is all. Bottom line, this is state against local governments. CAR doesn't want to get involved, as you can imagine, so there's no official position on it. I don't anticipate that will change. Okay.
Louie,
so yes.
This is Maria.
Maria.
Have to clarify in my mind what I mean on the cons of 21. Per the reference guide, we have it, the cons proposition 21 will make California's housing crisis worse. So undermines the strongest statewide rent control law in the nation, cost jobs, reduce home values, stops new housing from being built, and eliminates homeowner protections while providing NAP protections for renters, seniors, veterans, or the disabled. How do you answer to this con?
So what you're referring to is a very, very, very good point that everybody should be made aware of. Prop 21 is very different from other rent control initiatives in that this one actually does amend the Costa-Hawkins Act that we've had in place. The previous rent control initiatives, including AB 1482, did not really touch Costa-Hawkins in its pure form. It kind of left it alone, but nibbled away at the edges, if you will. Prop 21 is very different because it goes at the heart of Costa-Hawkins and it actually amends it. And it would amend the state constitution. So the argument you're making, or that I don't know if you're making the argument or just mentioning it, but that argument is part of the reason why the governor is against it. Obviously, because the governor represents a state and he doesn't want the state to lose power over rent control. But really that argument is, what I say is it true? Yeah, there is some truth to it, because if you eliminate the protections that are in place from Costa-Hawkins, that does create, in my mind, a worsening housing crisis. And it opens the door to a series of other problems with building new homes, essentially. So I would say that argument has more truth to it than not. So, but again, I hate to do this, but I think the way you can kind of think about this one in your mind is based on who supports it and who is not supporting it. And I'll just name some of the supporters. So some of the supporters, this is interesting because the Democratic Party is for it, but the governor is against it. You have Bernie Sanders, who's for it, but then you have a lot of groups that are in real estate that are against it, like property trusts. You have the iron workers that are against it, the carpenters union that are against it, but then you have the LA Tenants Union that's for it, the Eviction Defense Network that's for it. So this prop is setting a lot of groups that are traditionally with each other against each other based on that argument you just made, the fact that it's going to amend Costa-Hawkins. So yeah, that's this one we can talk about all day, which obviously we don't have the time to do, but yeah.
That's it.
Okay. All right, so the remaining slides, I'm just going to breeze through them. I'm not going to talk about them, only because I want you to be aware of what's on the ballot, and I also want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if there are questions, I'm going to present them on the screen. Just let me know if there are. Prop 14 is a stem cell research initiative. Those are the key points right there. The only thing you really got to, it seems like there's always a stem cell research initiative on a ballot. This is just another one. Really all this one is asking for funding for more stem cell research. So you can read up on that one. It doesn't really affect our industry. Prop 16 is the affirmative action proposition. And the easiest way to think of this one is that it would end the ban on affirmative action that was established in '96 by Prop 209. A yes vote will end the ban. That's really the way to think about it. I put a little bit of history at the first bullet point there. Oops, okay, sorry about that. Prop 17, this is a proposition that would restore voting rights for people that are on parole. The easiest way to think about this one right now is that individuals who are currently in jail, or a county jail though, not state crimes. These are like, theft, people that get arrested for a whole range of things. If they're on parole, they cannot register. Well, this would change that. And this would allow them to register if they're on parole. Okay, Prop 18, this one's an interesting one. This would reduce the voting age in California from 18 to 17, but the way it would do it is that it would allow people that are 17 but will be 18 by the time of the election to register and vote. So as long as you're going to turn 18 by the time of the next election, you would be allowed to actually vote. That's all this would do. In terms of numbers, it would increase about 108,000 people that fall in that category across the state to vote. Okay, Prop 20, this one is actually interesting. This one, I'll spend a little time on this one. It doesn't necessarily affect the industry, but it might, in that it has to do with background checks a bit. So this one would require the collection of DNA samples from people that are charged with and convicted of misdemeanor crimes. Currently, you only get your DNA collected if you're arrested for a felony, and typically it's like a serious felony, a violent crime, for example. But this would require the collection of DNA and your information, your DNA info, to be put in the national database, even if you were arrested for shoplifting or forging a check. And why I wanted to spend a little time on this one is because obviously in our industry, with state licensing, if there was something in someone's background, it may come up, but your DNA was never collected. Well, this would change that. So you may want to read up on this one, as it may have an indirect effect on someone who applies for a license in the future, or whatever it may be. Okay, Prop 22 is, this is the Uber and Lyft versus California, as I like to put it. Simply put, this is just Uber and Lyft saying, hey, we want to be able to hire our drivers as contract employees, not regular employees for reasons that they would have to pay for benefits, and it just puts the employee in a whole different category. And this actually does have some effect on our industry because of the 1099 status of a lot of people in the industry. So you may want to read up on this, but this is just continuation of the fight that the state has been engaging with between Uber and Lyft. You've read about it, I'm assuming. The state passed a recent law. Well, this is Uber and Lyft's response. Okay. Prop 23, this is a dialysis clinic requirement initiative. Not much new here. This is another one where I kind of just smile a bit, because there always seems to be a dialysis clinic, a ballot initiative, and the other one that I mentioned earlier. So this is just another one. Not much exciting about this Prop 23 here, but if you do know people that are on dialysis, this obviously would affect you. So I would encourage you to read up on it. Okay, Prop 24, this is a simple one to explain. It's the Consumer Personal Information Law Act, Agency Act. And what it would do is it would exempt essentially your personal devices from data collection. Right now, it would also create the Privacy Protection Agency, another agency in the state of California. And right now, your personal data can be extracted from your personal devices, also your laptops and desktops. Well, this, if passed, would ban the data collection from your personal devices. And personal devices would be defined as tablets and cell phones. It's actually a pretty interesting act if you're into like data privacy laws. And in our industry, it is a big deal with emails going out and who collects data that we purchase, for example. So I would encourage people that are interested to look into this one as well. Prop 25, the last one on the list here. This would replace the current cash bail system with risk assessments. Right now, we have a system in which if someone's arrested and they're going to post bail, you have to bring cash. And the argument is that that system allows for a lot of fraud. And this Prop 25 would replace the cash-based bail system with a risk assessment system. Simply put, if you're arrested and you're not a flight risk, you're going to be released on your own recognizance, meaning you will not have to post bail. This would only require bail for people that would be determined as flight risks or have a criminal history or a long rap sheet or whatever, or if it was a violent crime. Okay. So with all of that said, and out of respect for everyone's time, I want to make sure that you're aware of lavote.net. I created a little screenshot here of things that you can do on lavote.net. You can register. You can check your registration status. You can access the interactive sample ballot if you want to see what's on your ballot, for example. Find a mobile voting center, track your vote by mail ballot once you drop it in the mail, so forth and so on. They revamped the lavote.net website so much that actually now it's useful, where in the past it was very difficult to find information, but that has changed. So I highly, highly recommend that if you're going to vote by mail and you drop your ballot, I highly recommend you track it, and you can do it with lavote.net. And that's the URL at the top. But don't worry about all the long extensions. Just go to lavote.net and you can navigate your way to the screenshot that I gave you. Okay, with all of that said, I thank everyone for allowing me to present. If there are questions, I'd be more than happy to take them now, or if not, via email, or you can even text or call me. I will stop my share there and exit. There we
Louis,
go. Yes.
this is John Lacey. I want to thank the board for putting this on and for you for sharing your expertise.
Well, my pleasure, John. Thank you for your time as well, and everyone else's.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you. We appreciate your time. Thank you for
Oh no,
giving
my pleasure. And one.
and all clarifications on the ballot.
Oh, thank you. No, it's my job. I appreciate it. I actually like doing it, so not a problem. The only thing I'll leave with, if there are no other questions, is please vote. You know, we have so many members. We do our outreaches at times, and I always ask by a show of hands who's registered, and it is disappointing sometimes when not everybody raises their hand. So please get out there and vote. Doesn't matter who you vote for, what you vote for, just please vote. All right, if there are no other questions, I appreciate it. Feel free to reach me at the email or phone number that I had on the screen there, and we'll see everyone soon. Thank you.
Thank you.